Hello, digital warriors, and welcome back to the Forge of Unicorns podcast, where we explore the untapped potential of IT departments and the secrets to digital evolution. Today, we are diving into the challenges of digital transformation and how a unicorn's ecosystem requires a revolutionary perspective. Joining us are David Horne and Marty Balkema. Seasoned entrepreneurs and managing partners are camp capitals. With an impressive track record of identifying and nurturing high-growth startups, with a portfolio of thriving software and services business, including Wave, Honestly, and Judicial System, David and Martin are here to share their insight on what truly drives success in the digital age. Thank you for being here, and let me take a breath because I'm without.
Well, thanks for having us, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I'm really excited. Indeed, I wasn't able to breathe during the intro because I guess with you it will be a fantastic discussion because your portfolio is purely software driven. And so I feel that today will be an amazing episode. But before we dive into today's topic, let's hear about your incredible journey. You have played a pivotal role in baking startups that have fundamentally transformed the entire sector of the industry. When I look at your portfolio, I was in awe to see how a software-centric IT portfolio was made up from you, and I am really intrigued of your story. Names like Waves, Honestly, Judicial System, Service Commander, and Proteus Teams seems to me like a software-first investment strategy. Something not that common in a PE VC environment. So the question for you is, what inspired you to embark in this remarkable path? And what do you consider your most defining contribution to fostering innovation on such a monumental scale?
Yeah, I mean, Marty and I have background as consultants and operators. We spent a lot of our careers helping companies improve their strategy, their marketing, creative work, their digital products, how they build software, their teams, just completely, we spent the first part of our careers, Marty more inside some organizations, myself more externally, really solving like whatever the most critical problems were for those businesses. And sometimes that was very tactical, it was, hey, we need to launch this product or do this campaign and it requires this set of things. But other times it was a little more internal, and it was coaching and leading and helping a team internally build the right thing for the right people at the right time to get a good return on the investment of those businesses. And over time, as Marty and I got older, and we tried startups and had launched a couple to various success. Our kids were getting older, and we just said, our skills are very tuned for helping something that had kind of overcome the inertia of being a viable business and helping it grow. And so we said, well, one, we like helping companies go, say, from 1 to 10 versus 0 to 1. Those were the companies that interested us the most, companies that have been around for a really long time and were using technology to capture market share, to go into kind of the next stages of their business. So those companies were interesting to us. It aligned with our skill set. And lastly, we just said, man, wouldn't it be nice to own some of these companies we helped instead of just helping clients? And so that's really, I would say, a big part of the conversation that we had over the course of a decade, Mike, where we would get together and dream and talk about these ideas. And then in 2020, we kind of, drew a line in the sand and decided to make that a priority and start Calm Capital.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that is just to say, and as it goes in anything, once you get started, you learn a lot as you go, right? And I think that as we've made acquisitions, operated those businesses, in some cases sold those, we've kind of honed in on where we want to look, what kind of companies we want to look for, and the last couple of acquisitions have really really dialed that in further to be, hey, we really like these businesses that are specific and essential software that which is what we call it. So, so others call it vertical market software, but that's really what we've honed in lately. To your point about software first portfolio, so we continue to learn, we continue to figure out what we enjoy the most and where we think we'll find the most success.
I love it. I love it because indeed it's a kind of approach that is pretty unique. And I see, and I'm asking myself, but let's ask to you, what do you think set you apart in identifying high potential companies that you want to acquire? Because the point that David said, we want to not make from 0 to 1, but from 1 to 10, acquiring companies that were out there. So what drives this idea of, okay, this is the right asset that we want to intake?
I'll take that. You know, I'll start by saying I'll give you the answer today, and 6 months from now we'll learn. The whole experience has been incredibly humbling, right? And it's a good thing David and I have just high curiosity, I would say, right, and a willingness to persevere and learn as we go. But the answer today, I would say, is we really enjoy what sets us apart. We're really honing in on finding businesses that solve a problem for users that is going to be a problem over a long period of time. And it's a pretty simple, straightforward problem. It's pretty difficult for them to do their work and solve the problem without software. So that's kind of the essential piece, right? But that it's kind of a known universe. We know how many customers are potential available market. We know how to get to them. We know how to speak to them. We can have a pretty short list of their personas, and that we think that whether the software the day we met the company is the best software, the best version of the software or not, it's more about does the business have really good relationships and a reputation for solving those problems? And then we believe that a lot of times that equation, kind of that foundational starting point, is often started by founders who got it from 0 to 1 in the sense that they have a profitable business, they've got good product market fit, they've got loyal customers, but it's untapped in the sense of, could we build a better engineering team? Could we build a better customer success team, a better implementation team, and a better sales team, business development team, right? So I think that just us realizing what we have the energy and capacity and skills to do well in and of itself is a good starting point. And a lot of these businesses, it doesn't take an enormous amount of people and team to scale it from that 1 to 10 phase, right? Because it's a known universe. You have it's a niche software, and so that's our current thesis and value proposition about what we are good at and are becoming even better at, and plan to be great at in the future.
I love that. I love your point that software is so important that it's still, in theory, it should be well known what we have to do to create good software, but it's still a niche, so not that many. And this is incredibly pairing with the first observation that we have in our research. So when we start to do this kind of job as consultant long time ago, we start to observe patterns. And now that I'm 50 plus, I was hoping that these patterns, they were improving instead of diverging to less people that they know the good way of creating software and more people that embrace the wrong way. But it seems that a lot of people, they are even not aware that there is a good way to create software. And the point that we are observing is indeed that when I was working in F1, or when I am talking with my friends that are working in MotoGP, the quality, the perception that everything needs to be engineered in the system to deliver the maximum performance, that is on human side, on process side, or on tool on the operation side, is not there out in the market. And so I was thinking and overlooking in these years, indeed, in software, we don't have a marker that is like a German TUV that is telling us, hey guys, this is a amazing piece of software. So I guess that nobody even knows how good software looks like. What do you think about this missed chance to create potential unicorns due to the lack of recognized standard in IT and especially in software? How can we evolve and bridge this gap?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I also think it's a pretty, it's almost like it's an innocent miss, meaning nobody sets out to not do things right. It's almost like it's uh, the cause of it is that it's a low barrier to entry. So well, the good news is it's a low barrier of entry to get into software, especially nowadays, right? There's tons of knowledge. You can self teach. There's lots of software jobs for the most part, depending on the ebbs and flows of the economy or whatever. But the point is that I think it's a low barrier, and most of the time, the people who are investing in software inside of a corporation, an entrepreneur or a business owner who is paying a consultancy to create software, the people who are asking for the software that are funding the project, they don't have high engineering standards. They just need something that works. And most of the time with software projects, um, nobody really knows how to describe what's in their mind that they want to build. And so the way that I think most likely you would know better than us that F1 or MotoGP work is they invest in the R&D process. They invest in the labs portion where they understand that their first effort to solve a problem is potentially throwaway, and they fund it knowing that there's going to be this iteration before anybody can even know what the right thing is to build. And then once they get to that point, then they start fresh and engineer it properly now that they know what to build. I think in the normal everyday world of software, the patience for return on investment of a project is pretty short time period, right? And so whether it's just a corporate project where somebody has an idea, said, hey, I think if we did this project, it would help this department be more efficient. Well, how the project ROI needs to be either save money or make money. Typically, maybe the third thing would be improve the customer experience, but that really needs to be attached to the first two, right? I mean, these are why projects get funded. And so somebody says, well, when can we get that return? And this is, to me, this is the innocence of the lack of engineering. Is it's all about who is asking for the project. Does anyone know what we really need to build? And then the patience to do it right. And in almost every case in corporations or even in software companies or consultancies, to me it's the lack of funding, lack of patience that drives a lack of engineering standard, and that has led to iterative processes, agile processes, as well as, ideas like lean startup, bringing lean processes in to say, hey, let's build this minimum thing to make sure we're building the right thing. We're solving the right problems, that users actually would want this. Maybe users would want to pay for this and that kind of thing, right? So I think it's pretty innocent, but yes, I do think it's a problem.
Yeah. And I guess also, if I have to take in consideration my friends in MotoGP, especially, I guess, Ducati and Gigi Dall'Linea. So when they were thinking about winning the World Championship, they put it as a dream, and there was an ambitious, bold goal. And they start to do a lot of research and development. And then, indeed, they created some product, the MotoGP Ducati 2025, 24, 23. So the last years were dominated from this bike, but the genesis of the creation of this bike is long time back in the timeline. So
Right.
indeed, without a vision, a research and development, the patience to iterate, to improve the product, you cannot snap the fingers and everything, it will appear. Shaitan is not there in IT especially. And this is an intriguing point, because when I was having this discussion with some friends that they are not IT engineers like me, they were challenging me, saying, no, Mike, you are blind. You see only your piece of land. So I start to try to understand, am I right that this lack of standards is creating a scarcity of real software engineers? So what I did with my partners in the last 14 years was releasing open source the Software Craftsmanship Dojo as a tool to let people becoming an engineer. And that's a tool also to measure how a guy, a profile, a developer, let's say, is compared to a proper technical and socially prepared engineer in software. And so we start to have a lot of companies trying to ask us, can you assess our hiring pipeline? So over these 14 years, we have assessed something around 100,000 developers. A big enough number of developers to tell with confidence, let's say, that only 3% of the people we have assessed, they have technical quality, technical skills to go beyond the just enough quality you need to be in a team of engineers, high-performing team, but still as a junior. And then, with the time, I start to observe how some of them, they had problems in collaborating with the others, because IT is all about collaboration. You have multidisciplinary, multi-gender, multi-everything, multi-stack. So on every perspective, you observe an elite performing software development team, you see that the core ability is on social skills as well. So we start to put with our partner that is a behavioral psychologist, can we develop some behavioral metrics, and we call them sociometrics, to measure how a developer is able to interact and cooperate within the team and with the customer, because without a customer that is purchasing the goods or service that you are creating, you don't have the cash flow. So we did it, and the rate from 3% dropped to less than 1%, 0.9%. That is a staggering number that shocked me every time I'm talking about it. So, due to your exceptional point of view of the IT world from an investor perspective, which is your experience to transforming these startups and company, and how do you see the challenge of having this talent scarcity? Because to me, it's like we have a company that doesn't have the bricks to create the wall without these good, talented engineers. What do you think about it? How you can cultivate and attract this kind of good software engineers?
Marty, before you answer, this is related to this, Mike. I'll ask both of y'all. This is like a little bit of, I'm not trying to, turn the tables on the engineering, but listening to your question and then Marty, your previous response, something I think about, when you look at standards in professions, Mike talked about Formula One, in kind of that part. Marty, you kind of interesting that both of you guys have some background in automotive. Marty, you're with where you got your initial training and part of your career. When you're building a car or an automobile, the engineering, it has like the standard of quality that it needs to pass. People's lives are on the line if it drops below that standard, right? Like people potentially lose their lives. Same in other industry, biotech and pharmaceuticals sometimes, and doctors and, lawyers that you might not die. Well, you could if it's like a capital trial or something, but people's lives are at stake. And so the stakes are so high in some of these other industries where there are standards that you must meet socially, technically, from all of those aspects. Whereas in software, there seems to be a perception and in many cases, the stakes aren't quite as high. And so you get into that, Marty, you talked about the return and the patience. Well, if someone could die if you did the job wrong, you have a lot more patience to get it right because everyone knows that. And I wonder, Mike, you're kind of talking about this talent level, and Marty, you kind of talked about the barrier for entry. And I wonder how much of that is, a lot of times it's the perception that the product that you're building, the software that we are putting into this business to solve a problem, the stakes aren't as high. Therefore, the quality or the standards are lower. The bar is lower. But sometimes that's not the case. And as more software is integral to living and the things that we do, even things that historically, you think about, like we have gas heat in our house, right? Well, there's software that does that. The stakes are pretty high because if that gets messed up, we could suffocate in our own house. The house could blow up. I mean, there's software is getting into more things that have higher stakes, but the standard doesn't seem to be, tracking with that. So how much does that play into the talent aspect gap of it, as well as just the condition and approach of the team and who's building it?
I have my own perspective, but I would love Marty to start it.
I don't mean to go off script. It made me think about it.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. I have my own perspective because I just released a research on AI and the impact on software don't build properly. But yeah, I guess I need to do another podcast around it, and probably I will. Marty, what is your thoughts about it?
I mean, I think what we're talking about here is the concept of there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs, right? Because when, if you had infinite amount of time and budget, then back to what I was saying earlier, you can make the standard as high as you want, right? And there, even with using the automotive industry, there's still, I would say even though the standard is high, it's still the minimum amount of standard to achieve the results or meet regulations or whatever, right? And then maybe if you're paying a premium if we think about the automotive industry, maybe they do go above the standard because that's what's premium. But for the most part, it's all about trade-offs. And, for example, I've worked with software engineering teams who will debate test-driven development as a process, right? Or extreme programming and these practices, right? And a common outcome of those conversations, no matter where people start in the debate, is that there's a diminishing point of returns where as far as the percentage of test coverage in a code base, for example, right? There's a diminishing point of return in test automation coverage in a code base, right? But that implies it's all about trade-offs, right? Is it okay to release this before it's perfect? Is it okay to release this before it's has zero defects? Well, again, it depends on the application, and it also just really depends on the motivations of the stakeholders. Back to your research about the 3% and the 1% when you move from technical to social, which I think is really intriguing, is, you know, it's almost like amazing and disheartening, and it's almost like almost depressing if you're in the world of software, being how you're building a business, to hear those kind of stats. I think that, maybe it's the optimist in myself and in David or people like us that, what's the number one thing that, that you need to be an entrepreneur or a business owner? You got to be an optimist. You got to believe that you can find success, right? And so I would almost flip those stats a little bit to say, what is the impact? What is the positive impact of finding the best person we can find? Maybe they wouldn't be in if you think of your stats as like a bell curve, or your research as a bell curve, maybe they wouldn't be inside the 1 or 3%, but would they be right outside of it? Right. And then how do we invest in them? Like, how do we find people who are capable of learning and capable of changing, improving, and they're in a better starting point the day we hire them, and they're better a year later, and they're better a year later. To me, that's what is the kind of powerful takeaway from the research that you're doing. I mean, that again, the optimist in me, it wants to say, well, how this also means that it's hard to compete with each other, because the competitors have the same challenge in that research that we do. So if that means there is scarcity, and that means that if we focus on a small, high performing team with high engineering standard, right? We can't, but again, it's all back to trade-offs. You kind of have to have this long-term view, which again is also back to why David and I love our business model, to where we don't have time horizons other than stay in business, keep growing the bottom line, keep reaching new customers, but as far as a specific, like, we have to get it to this point by this date, we can be patient, calm and patient.
Similar, Marty, I was thinking about that as well, is if those are the stats, right? I mean, it's not like, there's this big group of highly talented, because the group that is actually proficient is that less than 1%, I mean, 1 out of 100 people. That's really hard to compete with at our level. That 1%, those 1 out of 100 people are going to whatever the top, I mean, they get their pick, basically, right? It would seem. Let's just use that as an assumption. But if we can take folks with that a little higher starting point, like you were saying, maybe they are a little off, but we put them in an environment and pair that with really good leadership, that's where we can create a competitive advantage, as well as pull some of those people up to a standard that is high functioning or close to high functioning. I think about your best coaches in anything, and Mike, I remember coached judo and martial arts. It's easier to find the best talent you have, because you can do more with that talent than you can less, especially if they're coachable. And that person will bring up the rest of the team. And so if we can find one person on the team and lead that person well, it will bring the rest of the team up to a standard that creates a good return for the business and is a great environment and a fulfilling role for the individual.
It's beautiful how both of you have addressed the concept of coachability with different perspective, because indeed these numbers that we have, I'm an optimistic like you, and also because I am a professional judo and jiu-jitsu trainer and a coach on the field of IT, I see this number flipping the coin. These 97, 99% of people are people that potentially they can become an engineer.
Right.
What they need, the secret ingredient, is the will, the passion to arrive to that point, and the humbleness to arrive to that point. And this is an interesting observation, because moves us to the next point that we are measuring, that is a behavioral consequence when you have in a company the larger majority of people that they don't meet this 3 or 1% of high quality standard. So let's say that they are average mediocre. Mediocre that if they have the will and the humbleness with the Software Craftsmanship Dojo, they can become software engineers. But if not, they are doing and are behaving something and somehow in a company in a way that their combined behavior, so the compound of all these people behaving, that is the representation of the culture in where they work, is a culture of people that are mediocre. So these are the toxic culture that in a company we observe immediately, looking at how the company in a social compound is behaving. If they don't have these high standards, they are mediocre. And if they are mediocre, they cannot grow to become a unicorn. So this is an interesting behavioral assessment that we use typical with the framework of the key behavior indicator observing an organization. And I want to turn around it as a question for you. How do you think organizations stuck in this mediocracy loop with only people that are not top performer can adopt a mindset to shift and unlock their full potential as organization and as people inside? Because our organization should be human-centered.
How David and I have a tendency to talk about this subject is through the lens of the word stewardship, right? So we try to talk to our teams and really act as coaches to say, hey, when we bought the business, it was at one point. We are over time stewarding that business as a whole, and it is our objective to get it to a better place. And then, of course, we have to define what better is. Is it measurable? What is the roadmap? Because you can't just snap your fingers or wave a magic wand and get to some future destination. You have to cast that vision of how are we as a team, as a company, going to steward from starting point to a better point, and then break that down into bite-sized chunks to build this roadmap and this kind of strategic plan. And I would just add to it, it takes also a lot of energy and enthusiasm, right? You've got to continue to communicate that vision and continue to communicate enthusiastically that status quo is not what we do around here. And then of course, model it and back it up with investment, back it up with an extreme, extreme prioritization, and not getting off track and hey, I thought we said we were going over here, but then this shiny object popped up, and now we're investing time in there, and so you have to be really careful about those. But I would just say we've seen it. We've even recently. I mean, without getting into a lot of specifics, when we raise that bar of what success looks like, people who aren't up for that challenge will self-select out. We've noticed, right? Which is a little painful because obviously those folks they were contributing on a daily basis. They had knowledge, they had specialized knowledge or whatever. But in the end, usually that's a very refreshing thing that happens. So there's a purging, right? So I would say, really it is a lot up to a leader or a coach or or the whole leadership, that allows the mediocrity, that allows the status quo. Again, back to the optimism thing. We believe that most people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be on a team. They want to carry their weight. They want to have the backs of their teammates, and they want to personally be on a journey to get better at it, at contributing to that team effort. And if we kind of start with that assumption and behave accordingly, it seems to attract the right people, repel the wrong people, and pull everybody up to a higher standard. Again, though, it comes back to patience. These things have to be intrinsic, as you were mentioning earlier. They have to be that, this isn't a command and control thing. People have to intrinsically be motivated to be attracted to this kind of culture and this kind of change. And not everybody is up for that, or they're not up for it in that season of life because of whatever circumstances, and that's okay. But again, if we go all the way back to what I said in the beginning, like how David and I try to think about it is stewardship. And as an individual, we have to steward our gifts and talents. And as a team, as a company, it is what we're charged with. It's our responsibility to steward it. I also think we try to talk about how does work fit in, like what is work in our lives, right? And again, I think that's back to stewardship, right? It's this idea of we do want people who care about the craft of engineering, care about being better at their skills. For example, yesterday afternoon, was a late stage interviewer of a potential software project manager, for example, yesterday, and the interview went great. And I just thought, wow, this young in his career, kind of 5 years out of college, he's got enough experience to have good stories, good answers to interview questions. But he's also hungry to be part of something. So when we talk about, hey, we're going to take this company from good to great, we're gonna take it from number 3 spot in a market to number 1 spot in a market over the next 3 to 5 years. He just lights up, right? He gets really excited about that, and he starts talking about how he thinks he could contribute to that, right? So I think that's I don't know, that's what comes to mind about how we handle what you're talking about.
I love this perspective, and I love how in all the discussion, the coachability and the passion, they are intersecting each other in all the reply and questions. Because indeed, what we are observing on the market is that not every C executive or even not every investor like you, they are putting their skin in the game. And what we observe, that is for me a drama, and I am really sad to observe this in our industry, is that a lot of companies, because they don't have a leadership that puts the skin in the game, they are embracing the concept of traditional digital transformation. So they ask a consultant to put with a highly expensive bills at the end of the month or the project, their skin in the game to move the company from A to B, from waterfall to agile, from agile to scale agile, to no DevOps to DevOps. Now there is the AI hype. So with my partners, we were discussing, okay, how is the success ratio of this traditional digital transformation? So we start to collect some data about how we have observed this from multiple angles in multiple industries. And then we start to intersect this data with a big player like Deloitte, McKinsey, Boston Consulting, and was a fantastic report, a public report from McKinsey, that they were saying that almost only 7% of company investing in digital transformation, they observe tangible return of investments. So I start to ask myself, okay, 7% is not that much. How much money we are pumping in this digital transformation. And I was shocked when I understood that almost 91% of the companies out there in the market, they are doing digital transformation. So it means that people like you is only the minority. And these 91% of people, only last year, they invested, I don't know if they invested or they wasted, let's say, figure it out. They invested $2.5 trillion. And due to the high digital disruption that we are living in nowadays, the forecast and provision for 2026, 2027, if I remember, is from 4 to 5 millions. It's a gigantic amount of money if the success ratio is only 7%. So it's beauty how it starts to be clear your secret sauce, having the skin in the game and the passion. So given this secret store and your experience in guiding startup to disrupt and innovate, to be persistent, to be patient, what steps do you think organizations must take to move beyond this traditional and effective leadership and framework system? How can they adapt their strategy to foster resilience, relevance, meaningfulness, well-being, probably?
I probably don't have the best answer. Certainly not one from a technical aspect, but just continuing to pull on the thread around stewardship and the environment. The way I think about it, Mike, is what does success look like in a digital transformation practice, or is it a project with a start or end date? Is it true that technology is going to continue to change and transform the way we do things for, as long as we're doing things? So a lot of and this may be contrarian and it may not be relevant, but the way I think Marty and I approach a lot of this from the starting point of stewardship and defining success is you don't have 100% control over the results all the time. What you do have control over is the environment you create, the actions, your attitude, doing the things that to the best of your ability to how you can do them to move towards the opportunity to have results happen. Now, by doing that, you're going to achieve probably more results than someone who isn't controlling the things that they can control. But it's a bit of a paradox. I think part of the way we think about achieving return on this investment or things being successful is by not focusing on trying to achieve success in the first place, or defining success as the things that we can control versus we've got to hit this metric or the transformation was a failure. So what does success look like? What does failure look like? And knowing that there are so many variables outside of your 100% control that we're just going to do the things that we know how to do to the best of our ability, create the environment, coach, lead, do those things, get better at doing those things, and the results we will maximize the results we can have by the process by which we pursue them.
I'll add a couple of stories, two examples. One is a 130-year-old company that we've been close to that's doing some digital transformation, and then one is a brand new startup that we did some work for as well. And I think in both cases, to piggyback on what David is saying, is there's a bit of concept where they're aiming small, missing small, and they're focusing on delivering results. So maybe that's what, when people aren't doing that, the hypothesis would be that if you're not having a specific result and that you're just throwing money and saying we're doing digital transformation, that you have a lot of opportunity to waste a lot of that investment. But if you're getting very specific to say, hey, we're going to start stacking wins on top of one another, and we're going to pick the thing we know that we've got the most energy behind, the most will, the most clear path to delivering results. So the two examples, one is we partnered with, this is through one of our consultancies called Honestly. And one of the businesses that we have, we partnered with this 130-year-old sock manufacturer, like textiles, sock manufacturer. And they had a brand new CIO who had come in, and he had ideas about digital transformation. But you have essentially a manufacturing environment, people that have been working there for generations, and obviously you could imagine that change comes slowly, right? What this gentleman did a great job of is picking a place that he felt like he could win. And so the example of digital transformation was these, in fact, Italian threading machines that were these high-tech textile machines that were creating the socks. They would offload system data that was really valuable, but it wasn't being used, and it wasn't being used in real time. So we worked with them, for example, to, first of all, understand what data was available, potentially what insights you could glean from that data. So similar probably to the brain of an F1 car, right? Somebody has all that data spitting off of the systems, and how do we use it for better efficiency? Same thing here, but what would happen is the general managers at 3 different plants would get a report, a static report, and they would get it 24 hours too late, basically, right? And this CIO was smart enough to understand that if we had that data in real time, we could do preventative maintenance. We could pull the F1 car off of the track and do a preventative thing, so we didn't have a bigger problem down the road, right? Very similar. And it was great because we were able to put real-time monitors on the line. So you had these non-technical work staff that we were able to put high-tech, cloud-based data with a nice user interface and a dashboard, and is this thing red, yellow, green kind of telemetry about how the machines were performing. And that one project saved, I forget the numbers, but it was millions of dollars a year right out of the gate. Well, the genius in that was picking the right starting place of digital transformation. The genius was, this is a pretty straightforward thing. It's going to get good visibility. It's clearly going to save, the ROI is going to be tremendous, right? And then what's happened is that produced so much goodwill with the leadership of that company and the board and the ownership and the employees. And so I feel like that's some of what's important is when people talk about digital transformation, it's so vague and it's so hard to understand where the win is going to come from. The results are not tangible. And if we can find, aim small, miss small, and find a good starting point, and then rally around that, and then build success upon success upon success, to me, that seems just kind of the way I've seen it work well. On the other side, we partnered with a couple of pharmaceutical doctors who were pharmacies. So they were hospital pharmacists. They would run hospital pharmacies, right? And that was their skill set. And they were trying to solve problems around the drug shortage problems. And basically knowing ahead of time and proactively predicting when there was going to be a shortage that would become a problem inside of a hospital operation. But how do we use software to do that? So again, a very old industry, very, very common thing. There's been hospitals for centuries. There's been, medicines for centuries, but they just saw a problem. But what we did a good job with, and that's that startup ended up getting funded. They had very little funding in the beginning, and so we really worked with them to get to aim small, miss small, to be able to find a first problem to solve that really was meaningful, but very small because they had a small amount of investment as a startup. And then that win got them to the next round of investment where we could solve more and bigger problems with them, right? And eventually they got funded fully to hire a full-time team event software engineers and a CTO and everything. But that was a really another fun example. So for me, at least in my experience, one of the biggest problems is not being specific enough about how you're going to direct that investment in the early days.
I like it, and I like your examples because are really resonating with my philosophy and my mantra that we should stop doing digital transformation, instead embracing digital evolution on an hypothesis-driven and a data-driven approach. So we harvest the right data. With the right data, we design with critical thinking and emotional intelligence, not only pure IQ, the hypothesis with the outcome that we want to reach, and then we do what is the best for the people and the company. Because an interesting point that we start to observe, especially after COVID, is that a lot of organizations that start to be in difficulties due to the crisis, they forget that there are people working inside. And working as a coach on IT and also outside with people that are doing a normal job here, I start to see their mood changing in the last 5 years. So with my partners, we were discussing, guys, what shall we do? What can we do in order to be sure that I'm not hallucinated, that I see people grumpy where instead they are only busy thinking? So I start to investigate, are there any research that can help me to understand if my Italian empathy is too much for the actual world? And so I was able with our psychologists in the team to find some intriguing research, indeed two, that are measuring one aspect that a lot of people doing canonical digital transformation, they are forgetting. People, when they get a failure, and we saw that only 7% succeed. So the 93% of people that they went through the digital transformation, that they were asked to change and then they failed, they developed what is called emotional trauma. And there are a lot of good publications from Scott Giacomucci, that is a behavioral psychologist in US, that I love his way of working, because discussing on emotional trauma, this has consequences. So we start to measure these consequences. And we came out with some research, and we found other research that in the last 2 years, there is a steady, stable amount of people that are disengaged with emotional trauma, like silent quitting or loud quitting, that is disarming, because it's 77% of the worldwide labor force is disengaged nowadays. And then I went even an extra mile and I asked my guy, hey, can we find a way to measure which are the consequences of this disengagement? Because I see people that are depressed. So he came out with a research that is not measuring directly depression, but the early stage of depression, that is burnout. And the burnout after the COVID is indeed rising from 19% to a staggering 38-40%. So I start to have data finally to discuss about something that I felt as empathy working with my coaches. And so I start to correlate these with the dysfunctionalities of no standards, scarcity of talents. Then we do digital transformation, we fail, and people, they start to be demotivated. Given your completely different perspective as an investor that puts the skin in the game, and you are nurturing our performing teams in startup, how do you think business can address these challenges to foster engagement, well-being, and eventually productivity, because it's a direct consequence?
It's a great question. I think that it is, although we might have seen some acceleration in the disengagement in the last few years, I think this has always been a problem for companies. I think a lot for me, a lot of it goes back to what I was saying earlier about a belief that we all want to be part of something, and we want to be part of different communities, and that we have to have hope that things are, whatever the current state is, that it's going to get better. Like there's got to be that I'm on a team who's going places, right? This is going to get better. I think that's where a lot of that disengagement or that depression you mentioned comes from, is just this lack of thinking that anything is going to get better. I also think sometimes it is well founded in the sense that we're not, that people feel like, again, it kind of goes back to the hope, but people feel like they're not set up for success, right? That's the question, kind of how I try to approach it, is asking like giving the person the benefit of the doubt and thinking, have we set this individual up for success, or have we set this small team up for success? Well, what does that look like? Like, what are the acts, to what David was saying, what can we control? Our attitude and our actions. So as leaders, as coaches, as managers, how do we say, have we set these people up for success? Well, what does that look like? It looks like, a clear vision, a clear set of clearly communicated expectations about what they can do, the proper training, the proper communication channels, the giving them, creating an atmosphere of grace to where people aren't fearful of screwing up, fearful of only having one chance to get it right. So again, back to kind of this atmosphere of growth, this growth mindset, to say, hey, it's okay. Like, nobody's perfect, but here is what the standard is, and here is where we're going, and here's what the expectations for your role, and here's what success looks like. But here's also what this ability to model what how you kind of own success for yourself, right? So giving people agency, I think, is what I'm trying to describe, is giving people this ability that they aren't just beholden to a losing situation that they can't affect, that they can't have agency. So to me, but again, I think that some of this, though, that's just the human condition a little bit, right? Like, I think this is as old as it gets, is helping people get rid of fear, having more hope, being patient with them. And also, I would say, a lot of people don't have a lot of encouragement in their life, right? A lot, I find that it's amazing how, just real quick, I took my 4 children downhill skiing earlier this week for a couple of days for the very first time. And it's amazing to see the progression of 2 days of practice, and what they were initially scared of, which simply because it was the unknown. And then it was scared because they fell a couple times and they saw the big hill, and they weren't sure they could stop or turn. But we would just take baby steps, right? And we would build success upon success. We would get up when we fell down. But just, if you take that kind of metaphor into the workplace, if you will, there's probably not enough of that going on with individuals, because whether you're an entry level staff person or you're an executive, it just means you have more responsibility, you have more people you're accountable to, the stakes are higher as a leader. But those people need encouragement too. Those people need grace too. Those people need to know that it's okay to fall down and get back up, right? And I think that sometimes we think, well, if you get to that point, or that you're a team lead, or you're a manager, a leader, that you don't need all that encouragement, all that coaching. I just read David and I both just read a great book about a very successful business coach in Silicon Valley. And it just reiterated the point that even the people running the biggest companies in the world need a coach.
Right. And that would be the only thing I would add to, or kind of double click, to use the common expression these days, on what Marty was saying, was just also recognizing that, hey, we're people and leaders need encouragement. We also want to create an environment and coach our leaders to recognize when people need something. And then what can we do to provide things that are beyond our capability, or really even the role in the workplace. For example, this is just one of the things that we've done is provide like a chaplain for all of our employees and their families. Just trying to do, like, be a neighbor. We just want to be a neighbor outside of work, right? We are not people who believe that work is family and all that kind of stuff. That's not what we're saying, but we are neighbors. So we work together. We also are neighbors. I'd want to provide things for my neighbors too. And so we try to look at, like, what are things that we would want to provide if they live next to us? How could we care for them outside of the work, and knowing that is before their employees, or before their team members, or before their bosses, their neighbors. They're humans that we live with. So that's another thing that at least we try to create, that type of environment to address some of those issues, because I think we undervalue the importance of kind of that emotional well-being in a lot of cases. And it's hard, I would say, for Marty and I, we had kind of athletic backgrounds and some of those kinds of things. And so you kind of had the suck it up and do it and all that kind of stuff, which is true, but we have generations from, early 20s to 60s in our companies, and generationally they process those things way differently. And so we have to be able to create an environment that is conducive to all of those folks being able to do their best work and have emotional well-being. And again, that kind of goes back to, like, being a good neighbor. If you lived in a neighborhood, you probably got people from multiple generations. So, like, how do we create something for those folks? So
I love your analogy. I was thinking of the camaraderism typical in the army, but the neighborhood as a concept is even more powerful because there is the diversity component as well. I like it. I guess I will borrow this stuff now.
That's why I just got it from the book of Mark. So
okay, good. Speaking about books and how much this neglected well-being on human side is creating as a loss of productivity, I will shock you now, because only last year were $9 trillion, that is almost 10% of the global GDP, wasted in humans that they don't feel that doing what they are doing on the job is meaningful. And this is disarming to my heart, absolutely. And this is something that indeed we need to have more leaders that are coaching people, that are nurturing this well-being aspect of being able to fall, nothing happen, and then stand up. Instead of your analogy, Marty, having your 4 kids that they are trying to ski for the first time, a lot of companies, they are asking their employees that they have to ski, but they have to do the jump with the ski. That was the first time. And then if you go out of the cliff and you break your leg, so it's normal. And you have to stand up. Doesn't care that you are with broken bones. Yeah, and this is, for me, something that indeed is a tremendous problem. That especially is a tremendous problem because a lot of these companies that we are observing out there, they look the success of the neighbor, returning on the concept of neighbor, so the competitor out there, and they say, they are doing that. You know what? Get a cookie cutter, copy what they are doing and smash it here. So all these companies that are trying to blindly adopt agile, scaled agile, DevOps, AI tooling, laying off, voluntary payoff that they have to reduce the labor force. So the concept that we are observing is the concept that we call the one size fit all, or as we call also the cookie cutter. That seems to be counterproductive. And I believe that in your experience, you are not doing normal agile. You are doing more probably extreme programming, but I'm here to be not right. We will see. So how do you see in your experience, which kind of philosophy have proven successful in transformation that move a company in a healthy social environment where people, they can put their passion and talent to the top?
Man, I'm Marty. I'm looking forward to hearing your answer. But Mike, I just want to comment on that. I mean, man, how damaging is comparison? I just think about with your research, right? That's what it sounds like to me. It's like you're comparing yourself to someone else. You have no idea what their circumstances are. I heard one time things are never as bad as it looks like, and they're never as good as it looks like. Like we have such a limited view on what's happening next door. If we can continue beating using the neighbor analogy, and so you've got this comparison where it just creates this whole set of assumptions. I mean, Marty and I are really good friends. We have a lot of the same thinking, but our families operate probably, I would assume, like super differently. He has 4 kids with 3 daughters. I have 2 kids with 2 sons. Mike, you have family that's different than ours. We could look what each of us is doing and say, "Oh, look at how that family's operating or going on vacation or whatever." And if I'm comparing to you guys, I'm not going to probably get the same results because I have a different set of circumstances. And so the comparison trap, it kind of sticks out to me as like a hopping off point potentially for this question. But Marty, I'm excited to hear kind of what you're saying or you think, as you've seen a lot of this over the years.
Yeah, I think the main thing that comes to mind. David and I have done a fair amount of studying of Coach K, the Coach Krzyzewski, the Duke University legendary basketball coach, and through things we've read of his, or being proximity here in North Carolina, the people that we've spent time with who have spent time with him, or just listening to him being interviewed on a podcast, let's say recently. And one of the things he talks about that I really like is he resets the theme of the year every year, and he looks at what's the makeup of the team, where are my talents, am I have tall players or shorter players, I have fast players or slower players, do I have freshmen or seniors, do I have several leaders that are standout leaders, or do I have just one standout star? He has to look at it every year, and then he has to say, what is success? How do we define success this year? And what's our theme? And he has principles that never change, but he has these themes, or this way that he goes about it. And I think it's similar to how you would run a software team, in the sense of it depends a little bit about the stage you're in, who's the player personnel development side of things, just being realistic about there not being a one size fits all, like we always do software this way. So part of it's the team you have, the maturity of that team. And then I think a part of it is also kind of the phase of product development you're in, right? Are you on the end of the spectrum that is very much maintenance mode, or is it regular release mode, or is it innovation mode? And I think those could tend to lend themselves to different agile applications, right? So, for us, a lot of times we're operating in a pseudo between, just call it pragmatic agile. There, I think that the main thing is do we know what we're building, and do we have a way to communicate with one another and move work through the system, right? So that's bit. And a lot of times Kanban fits that bill really well. Just a very simple Kanban process. I really do like the rituals of Scrum, right, and the methodical nature of sprints and reviews and just all of the different kind of ceremonies that go along with that. But it's pretty hard to go all the way back to look at the Agile Manifesto and read through that and think any of it isn't really good ideas. It all is all really good ideas, but the exact way you implement it and flavor of it, I think, has to change based on the mode you are in what you're engineering, and in again, innovation to maintenance and everything in between, as well as just the team that you have. Again, that comes back to someone has to lead that team. Someone has to step up and say, I've assessed the situation, and here's what we're doing, and here's how we're going to all work together. That still has to happen. I just think that saying one is always the best tool, and or like you said, we should do this because somebody else did this. I don't think. I mean, if Coach K changes from year to year, right? I mean, we should maybe take note of that.
Yeah, but also if you look at the Japanese philosophy of the shuari, you don't get a dogmatic, rigid framework and you keep it. It's dogmatic and rigid at the beginning because it's providing you a new biomechanic or a new mindset. But then after the shu, you move in the aha and the re phase where you evolve. And for this, I continuously say that we need to stop doing transformation and really embrace an evolution. Because if this is on human side, surely, when you have a team and the team is moving in different direction, you have a leader that needs to pull them in the same direction with a clarity of purpose and a goal. But then somebody leaves, somebody comes. So the game of the shuari is an evolution and is continuous, it's perpetual. So the blind, dogmatic cookie cutter, get the safe, agile stamp is more harmful than benefit. But yeah, I have a lot of data about this, but I guess it's not the point to discuss it. What I would love to do with you now is really going deeper in the perspective that you have on all the discussion, on all the world of IT, how much it can be used for the sake of creating added value to change the world. Because in your unique point of view as investor, as mentor, as coaches, and people that they start as consultant, do you see all these issues that we have talked so far, that they are playing a role in the organization that you intake and acquire? Or do you see that they have different stories? Are there commonalities in their stories before you acquire and help them that are different? Which is your perspective on the companies that you have in your portfolio now and how you took and onboard them before?
I think if I understand the question correctly, the thing I think that we're learning the most that would wrap all of what we've talked about here today up is we're learning how to be more assertive and less passive about assuring that the principles we've talked about today are happening day in, day out, right? That every day that we aren't influencing, coaching toward all of the ideas we talked about today is a day that's lost that you never get back. So while we're patient to the timing of improvement and the timing of getting all of these things in place, there still also needs to be a sense of urgency to be as assertive as a company can absorb change. Where I think there's a lot of lessons learned over the last several years of being, I would say passive, but just thinking that things will work out on their own. So I think your research. So I think getting your research in the hands of people in a distillable way, and then following up with, and here's what you can do about it, is a really important, powerful thing that the world needs for sure. I think that. Again, there's that sense of urgency as time flies, right? I can't believe that David and I have been doing this for 5 years already. It seems like we just got started. And so that means that the sooner we get really focused every day on affecting change towards these ideas, in 5 years from now is going to be right around the corner, right? And it's a matter of how much did we accomplish, I think, in that time, without necessarily feeling like we have to rush, but just making everyday progress. And a little bit of it, I think a lot about theory of constraints as a way of thinking about all of this, and just drilling that or drilling down into each aspect of each organization, and say, what's the bottleneck here? What's the best thing to improve today or this week or this quarter, right?
I love it. And speaking of the devil, time. It seems that the time flew indeed. So do you have any last advice? Probably we were enjoying it too much because it's more than an hour that we are talking. So do you have a final advice?
I appreciate, Mike, your dedication to just this topic of trying to raise the awareness and the standard of quality product development, but taking it from a people approach. Like the quality product, the quality software development is a byproduct of kind of people flourishing, meaning they're developing personally their skill sets and all those types of things. So I just appreciate your dedication to that research and impacting that as a, investor, as software employers and providers to our customers and the communities we serve. We, going back to kind of that stewardship, it's our responsibility to provide the most value we can responsibly to the people who benefit from the things we build. And to the degree that we can get better at how to provide that value, it creates more of a return for us, which then allows us to share more of that value back to the customer. And people can get up in the arms around, profits and business and all those kinds of things. But when it's done well, you're reallocating the value that you create back to the customers, as well as your employees, as well as the shareholders. Everybody wins in that equation, and it starts from the people involved, not the product that's created. So I see the research you're doing as helping contribute to providing more value, which creates more value for our communities. So that's all I would say. So I appreciate the work you're doing, and thanks again for having us.
Thank you to you. And yes, it's indeed my belief that we need to share this knowledge and this way of working with the world. Is this the reason why the Software Craftsmanship Dojo is open source? Because we believe that the future is software driven. And so we need to democratize software and the way of doing it in the right way. But guys, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insight today. Your journey was amazing. The potential of IT department that we can unleash embracing your mindset, in my opinion, is astonishing. And we need more people like you. And
Thank you.
It is a pleasure. For our listener, if today's discussion resonated with you, check out the Forge of Unicorn newsletter. Subscribe. Every week you will get new article research, every kind of information to help you and your organization and your investment to become more evolutive and to get out of your IT division the true potential of the people that you have inside. Until next time, stay curious and keep evolving. Ciao, David, Martin. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate you pulling that stuff out of us. It's fun to think about it.
Thanks for listening, and please remember to subscribe to the Forge of Unicorns to stay up to date with our latest episodes.